Hello everyone and welcome to Science Lab. The signs are happening because Jesus is coming. Every day we're looking at some of the signs that are happening around us, and today we're going to look at some of the end time signs happening in Europe.
3 years ago, 51.9% of the British public voted to leave the European Union. Almost 73% of eligible voters participated in the June 2016 referendum, the highest turnout ever for a referendum.
More than 33 million people voted, and the result was unequivocal. The majority wanted to leave the EU.
Three years have passed and Britain hasn't budged. In that time, Brexit has taken out two prime ministers, lobotomized the nation's two largest political parties, and paralyzed the political system with division, dysfunction, and scandal. Why hasn't Britain left the EU? Options abound, but one thing is evident. Since June 2016, an alliance of government agencies, corrupt politicians, and bureaucrats and the mainstream media has worked surreptitiously to prevent Brexit. Britain has a deep state that is passionately committed to rejecting the democratic mandate of the British people and keeping the nation wedded to the European Union. In an interview with LBC earlier this year, Boris Johnson warned what will happen if the government does not separate Britain from the EU. I think that people will feel betrayed, he warned, and I think they will feel there's been a great conspiracy by the deep state of the UK, the people who really run the country, to overturn the vote in the referendum. Johnson received a lot of flak for the remark. Many discarded it as typical Johnson hyperbole, but the evidence is on his side.
Britain's deep state includes some of the nation's most influential personalities and institutions, including the BBC, the Electoral Commission, the Treasury, the Bank of England, and career politicians, civil servants, and media elites. Most devastatingly, it also includes large factions of both the Labour and Conservative parties.
Let's start with Britain's Electoral Commission, the independent body responsible for overseeing elections and regulating political finance. This critical organization is supposed to act at all times to uphold its impartiality. To the contrary, the Commission has been used as a powerful weapon to attack pro-Brexit organizations.
A 2018 investigation by the Sunday Telegraph revealed that at least 4 members of the Commission's 10-member board have publicly voiced support for the Remain campaign. Chairman Sir John Holmes is an avowed Remainer who has said that he regrets the result of the referendum. The Electoral Commission has been accused of raiding Brexit party headquarters 2 days before election and turning a blind eye to finance violation by anti-Brexit organizations, while at the same time engaging in exhaustive investigations fishing for violations by pro-Brexit campaigns. The Electoral Commission has actively persecuted most of the key leaders of Brexit campaigns since the EU referendum. Matthew Elliott, Chief Executive of Vote Leave, Darren Grimes, Head of the Youth Campaign Believe, and Dominic Cummings, Campaign Director of Vote Leave, have all faced harassment and investigations from the Commission. For example, after the referendum, the Electoral Commission investigated, fined and reported Vote Leave to the police for allegedly breaking the rules of campaign finance. The case went to the High Court, where Vote Leave proved that they had actually consulted with the Electoral Commission about campaign donations and had operated according to its written advice.
In September 2018, after 2 years in court, the High Court ruled that the Electoral Commission had given vote leave the wrong advice. In its judgment, the court described the Commission's behavior as unconstructive and arbitrary and in crucial instances lacking rational basis.
This organization is responsible for safeguarding Britain's democracy and the rule of law. Since 2016, Brexiteer politicians have also become targets of the anti-Brexit deep state. The most obvious example is Nigel Farage, the leader of the recently created Brexit Party and the godfather of Brexit.
Farage is routinely depicted by establishment politicians and the media as a xenophobic, far-right lunatic who is bent on returning Britain to the Middle Ages. The truth is, Nigel Farage is by far the closest to being in harmony with the majority of the British public on Brexit. Other Brexiteers have also come under attack. On May 29, 2019, for example, a district judge in London issued a court summons to start a criminal prosecution of Boris Johnson for remarks he made during the EU referendum about the cost of EU membership. The judge's decision to sanction the criminal prosecution to routine political discourse surprised and alarmed many. This feels like a dangerous moment for our democracy, said Stephen Parkinson, senior partner of London law firm Kingsley Napley. Once we allow the criminal law into the arena of political debate, policing what can and cannot be said, that will inevitably have a chilling effect and ultimately undermine democracy itself. By these standards, virtually any politician could be taken to criminal court. Britain's High Court stepped in and dismissed the lower court's decision just in time to Conservative Party members of Parliament are in the process of selecting Britain's next Prime Minister, and Boris Johnson is the leading candidate. An ongoing criminal investigation would likely have removed Johnson, one of the party's strongest Brexiteers, from the race. Then, there's the BBC, an iconic organization and easily the most influential news organization in Britain. The BBC operates independently from the government and is financed by the British taxpayer. Its editorial guidelines state, impartiality lies at the heart of the public service and is the core of the BBC's commitment to its audiences. But not when it comes to Brexit and the UK's relations with the EU. The BBC has a long history of being pro-EU. This is documented in numerous polls and studies. This January 2018 report from Civitas, a respected think tank, documents how pro-Brexit voices have been marginalized in the BBC's coverage of EU issues for most of the past 20 years.
The report is filled with evidence showing the BBC's anti-Brexit bent. For example, of 4,275 survey period guests talking about the EU on BBC Radio 4's flagship Today program between 2005 and 2015, only 132 people, which is about 3.2%, were supporters of the UK's withdrawal from the EU.
A YouGov poll from January 2018 showed that 45% of Leave voters believed that the BBC was actively anti-Brexit. Among Remain voters, only 13% considered the BBC pro-Brexit.
And now it's time for the trivial question of the day. is the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
Here your options are option A, Theresa May, option B, Boris Johnson, option C, Jeremy Hunt.
We'll find out the answer after a short break.